I'm excited to talk tonight about relationships because I'm very passionate about this and always have been. And I think because I've done it so badly for so many years. And my passion for this is so strong that when I became a therapist, I wanted to make sure that we got people in who were well-trained to work with couples and all the different issues, not just therapists who see couples. Most therapists, individual therapists, will work with couples, but that doesn't mean that, one, they're very good at it, and two, that they know what they're doing. So that was my purpose with the Marriage Place. And we have been alive now, on board, running for just over 3 years. It went from just me to over 12 of us now as part of the organization. I'm really proud of my team. A lot of them are here tonight. So afterwards, if you have questions, I'm going to ask if they have time to come up and meet you too, and you can see the group, the team, and talk to them. One thing that makes my practice really special, I think, is that we meet every week, we do additional training, and we talk about cases. So when you hire one of us, you get the collective experience of all of us, which is decades. That's pretty valuable. We work with couples who are on the brink of divorce. We work with couples where one wants out and one wants to save it. We work with couples that other therapists have given up on and say that we don't know what else to do with this couple. They come to us. So I'm proud of the group and I'm proud of what we do. So about relationships and about my relationship, this is kind of what I'm going to do tonight. This is going to get kind of personal. So I'm going to tell you some things that I'm pretty sure I've never spoken of publicly, maybe a few friends that I thought would love me anyway, no matter what kind of craziness they heard. And so I'm going to ask something of you in return. This is going to be pretty interactive tonight, so I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to ask for feedback, and so I'm just asking that you jump in, that you not be shy, not worry too much about being seen or being heard. And at one point tonight, I'm going to ask for volunteers to come up on stage. 8 of you, but you have a really easy job. You're just going to read a little paragraph. The audience is going to have the hard job. They're going to have to guess based on what they've learned, what it is that you're doing. So if you don't want to get put on the spot and have to know a question, you want to be up here reading, all right? So can we make that deal? Good. All right, so I told you, my husband and I have been married I haven't told you, but we've been married 27 years. And I really didn't think that we would survive the first one, much less the 26 that followed. I'm an expert on fighting in marriage. I hold a black belt in it, actually. I was born to do this. I'm not kidding. I was born to do this. I'm from Appalachia. These are my people. I think you've heard of them. The Hatfields and McCoys. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. I'm not proud. This is where I come from, Appalachia. And there's some good people there, but there's some dysfunction too, like there is everywhere, right? And we have feuding down to an art form. So by the time I married my husband, I knew how to hold a grudge, I knew how to get even, and I knew how to win every argument. The 3 perfect ingredients for a successful marriage. My poor husband never had a chance. Look how young we were. He knew that he thought he married a normal person. He knew that there were going to be upsets and disagreements on money and how to parent and how to raise kids and how to fold laundry, and there were. What he didn't know was that he married someone who could have a real-life throwdown. We hadn't been married very long when we had the fight. We've had lots of fights, but this one is the fight. It's epic. I'm not proud of some of the things I'm going to tell you. We're going to laugh a little bit, hopefully, about some of the stupid, crazy things I did, but it wasn't funny at the time. We were in a lot of pain. My husband and I, when we got married, his parents didn't love me like they do now. I think I was an acquired taste. I had to grow on them. I'm a little bit direct. And so John's mom would feel threatened by me, I'm sure. I felt threatened by her. And she would say things to me that were critical and mean. And I would want what every young wife wants, which is her husband to beat his mother up. That's what I wanted. And so he wouldn't do that. And so I wanted him to stand in between me and her to buffer, right? But my husband is a conflict avoider. So he hates when someone's upset with him or he's in a room where people aren't getting along. It makes him anxious. And so when his mom would say something and I would get upset, he would try to avoid conflict by saying to me, "You're too sensitive. Why don't you just get over it? She didn't mean anything by it." So I'm going to ask the women in the audience, how well do you think that worked for him to avoid conflict? Yeah, not so much. So he did avoid conflict with his mom, but he had more than his handful of conflict with me. And then there was one particular time she said something, and I can't remember what it was, but it set me on fire. And I looked over, and my husband was silent, pretending he didn't hear what she'd said. And I'm like, really? Are you going to, anything here? And he's like, just let it go. Why do we have to rock the boat? Just let it go. Well, that kind of sent me over the edge just a little bit. And so I told him I was done. We were in our first year of marriage and I wanted a divorce. We're not Catholic, but I thought, don't they get annulled within the first year? It doesn't even really count, So he comes from a family where quitting is not an option. Walking out of an argument is not an option. And I was determined that I was leaving. So I was trying to get out of the house. And John was determined that I wasn't. And so he was trying to hold me there. And then he was trying to bar the door and not let me out the door. Now, I'm no lightweight. He's 6'4". He's a big, strong guy. He's stronger, but I'm faster. And I managed to get out the door and get in the car and lock the doors. Whew. So here he comes. He's banging on the windows. Get out of the car, loudly. So in my new wife Christian way, I turned to him and flipped him the bird. And I probably was smiling when I did it. And that made him crazy. So I turned on the ignition to the car, and my normally brilliant husband, in his last attempt to keep me put, plopped himself on the back trunk, crossed his arms, and sat there. Now, looking back, I know he thought, I got her. What's she going to do? Exactly what I did. I put the car in reverse, and I hit the gas. And then I slammed on the brake. He doesn't look like he's an acrobat, does he? But amazingly, he stayed put. He stayed in place, which pissed me off even more. So I went through a series of starts and stops to try to knock him off the back of the trunk. And finally, at one point, I lurched so far, I heard this. And I look up in the rearview mirror, and he's still hanging on. But this time, he's on his front, his arms grabbing both sides of the car, and he's looking at me through the back windshield. I thought, man, this guy's persistent. I'd like to think that there was a moment where sense and sensibility took over, and I had the thought of turning the car off, going back in the house, and handling this like adults. But I didn't. So I put the car back in reverse, hit the gas really hard, and turned a sharp left out of the driveway. And he fishtailed. And when he fishtailed, he rolled off the car. That should have been the end. But I couldn't see him, and I was a little bit worried about him, so I moved forward just a little bit. I want to make sure he's lying there, he's okay. And I hear the darndest thing. I hear him yelling things at me really loudly, not very nice things. Foolish, foolish man. So I put the car in reverse and I just aimed for him. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking. I just aimed for him. He got quick then. I scared him because he rolled off the street into the ditch in front of our house. And I peeled rubber out of our neighborhood and left a path of rubber in front of our house. I want you to know before that time I'd never done that, and I've never done it since. But I apparently know how to lay rubber. I was so upset and so distraught that I drove out of our neighborhood, tears streaming down my face, couldn't see very well, speeding way too fast, being very irresponsible with a car. And I wrecked the car in the median of a major highway. And when I did, I hit a rock, and I hit a big rock. And it was so big that when I got out, the car was making this ticking sound. And the car was leaking something underneath, and I was leaking fluids. The car was leaking fluids. So I get in, and I find a garage, and I pull the car into a mechanic. And the mechanic's like, whew, this is bad. But really, you shouldn't be this upset. We can fix this. I'm like, yeah, we'll see if we can fix this. And he's like, I think you ought to call your husband to come get you. That may be a problem. He's like, this is really going to take some time to fix. Like, I really think you ought to call your husband. This might take some time. So I weighed the options, and then I made the phone call. I'm sure it went something like, hi, dear. Made it out of the ditch, did you? Jolly good, jolly good. I'm at the garage, I wrecked the car, come and get me. And bless his heart, he did. So when I tell you that I know how crazy that it can get with couples, I'm telling you this because I've lived it. I think ours was about as bad as it could get. We did not physically hit each other. Although I'm pretty sure that attempted vehicular homicide is some kind of abuse of some sort. But it was bad, and we weren't healthy together. And we wanted to get healthy together. Couples, we can do some crazy things together and to each other. And things that don't make sense on the outside when you're looking in. It's like you act in ways that embarrass you when you put on your work clothes and you show up at the office on Monday morning, the things you were able to say and to do. But that's where we get. And tonight I'm going to try to help us unravel how we get there, how that happens, and what causes things to get so emotional and crazy. Some of you I know that tonight your home is a battlefield. And I'm sorry for that, because I know that it's not a pleasant experience for you, and probably not for your spouse either. But you can stop this crazy behavior, and you can feel safer and more secure with your spouse. And that's the goal. That's what you want to do. Because, and you're going to hear me say this a couple of times tonight, marriages survive fights. They don't survive the loss of safety and security. So when you think about fighting in a marriage, I think about two camps of beliefs about it. One are the enablers, and one are the minimizers. The minimizers are the ones who, we'll start with them, they kind of have the attitude that everybody fights, what's the big deal? They justify a lot of what they do and say with the idea that their partner's making them do it, is putting them there, is forcing them into it. If he would just do this, I wouldn't have to. If she would just do this, then I would be a better person. I would be able to stop this. Minimizers, they don't necessarily enjoy the fighting, but often for them, they came from a family background that was much louder, much more violent, and so they've toned it down. And so for them, it's like, hey, this is much, much better than I had growing up. But it's still way too intense for their partners. Way too intense for the average normal person, and way too intense for any children growing up in the home. The enablers are the second camp, and the enablers, they know something's not right. They know the kids are seeing something bad and they don't like that, but they, one, don't know what to do to stop it, and two, they feel pretty scared and hopeless to change anything because they're afraid to stand up to their partner and say what's on their mind. To live in that environment, though, we call that cognitive dissonance, when your actions and your mind don't line up. So your belief is this is wrong, but here we are, we're in it. So they start to excuse it, they start to deny it, and they start to minimize it. I have a client who, she came to my office not that long ago. Her husband makes a lot of money. Really nice, handsome guy, she said. Been married a long time, kids are grown and gone. And she would vacillate between telling me what a great guy he was and how lucky she was to be in this relationship with him, but when it's bad, it's really bad. Back to, but who am I to complain? Because look at what all I have. Look at all he's providing. Look at what all I have. And just not real sure where to put her finger on this. So she's caught in that minimize, deny cycle. The scariest part about that is if you're there, no chance of change. No chance of anything ever getting better because you're accepting it, you're allowing it, right? Like most things in life, neither extreme is going to be helpful, the minimizer or the enabler. And we want to try to find a balance in these relationships to tone down the volatility. So tonight I'm going to talk about why couples fight. I'm going to talk about ways couples fight, the stance they take in those fights, because I think that's going to be important. You'll see why. We're going to talk about what healthy fighting looks like and dirty fighting looks like. And I'm going to give you a move, one parachute move for whatever your stance is to help you de-escalate in the moment, to hopefully keep things from getting as bad as they can get. And then we're going to talk about how to fix this dynamic for you as much as we can tonight. I mean, I hope you're not expecting to come here and in 1 hour you're going to know the fix-all for your relationship. It's just not, we're good, but we're not that good. All right, so this is some audience participation. So if you Google why couples fight, what kinds of things do you think you'd see come up? And I'll give you one. In-laws. Me. Why do couples fight? Money. Kids, house. Sex. Sex. They fight about sex a lot. What else? What was that? Control. Fight about control all the time, don't we? Okay, so that's right. These are all the things you'd find. All these articles, they write about why couples fight. But it's all wrong. This is what they're fighting about. This is not why they fight. Pardon? I had a lot of respect for my husband, but I can see why you would think that. Yeah, because it sure doesn't look like that, does it? It sure doesn't feel like that. And in fact, that's a good tie-in. What couples fight about is fear. Does that surprise anyone? They fight about fear. There's one fear that's universal that applies to all of us, and that's the fear of rejection. We all have it. Doesn't matter what culture you live in, doesn't matter what gender you are, doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. We're afraid of being rejected. We are created and born to love and be loved. And when that feels threatening to us, we start to defend, right? I had a client one time who, he was a Scrooge. He was a curmudgeon in every way possible. And his wife came in with him, and she was just the opposite. Polly, it was really interesting to see them. Mutt and Jeff, they just came in, and she's all energy, and everything's Christmas, and he's all hate people and hate things. And, and he was really sucking the joy out of her life. And so they sat down, and she said, He's mean to us. He's mean to everyone. We go out to restaurants. He's rude to the waitresses. I look at him like, what's up with that? What are you doing? What's up? And he said, I hate people. I just hate them. I remember thinking, but you are one, you know. And his wife says, it's true. He hates people. So I looked at him and I said, okay, so what happened to you in your life where you felt really hurt and really rejected? What happened that you reached out and you needed someone and they weren't there for you? And his wife jumps in before he even has a chance, and she said, it's never happened. He hates people. He doesn't let them get close enough to need anything from him. But I was watching him, and I was seeing a little bit of emotion there, and I knew I was onto something. I have a knack for digging. And so I was able to get it from him, and she was stunned. She'd never heard this. But when he was little, his mom would get really overwhelmed and really upset with him, and she would tell him that she regretted the day she ever had him, that bringing him into the world was the biggest mistake she ever made. And that crushed his spirit, just broke his little heart. And he carried that into every relationship that he had. So instead of putting himself out there, he pushed people away. If I'm mean and ugly and nasty and they don't want to be around me, that's so much safer than if I am vulnerable and I put myself out there and they still don't want me. So when he pushed him away, man, he became a master at it. And he pushed his wife away and he pushed his kids away. But that's kind of the thing. When our fears are triggered, it's what we all tend to do. As crazy as that sounds, we tend to react in ways that keep us from getting the one thing we want the most. That's the way it works in our brains. So, fear of rejection, that's one, but it's not the only one. Oh, yeah, fear doesn't understand logic, right? If you're afraid of connecting with people and being rejected, it'd make more sense you try to be nicer, right? Try to reach out to people more, not be hateful and mean. All right, women have their own core fears, men have theirs. This is underneath the rejection, okay? This one is gender specific. For a woman, her core fears are feeling disconnected or unloved in a relationship, not being heard or dismissed, not being appreciated, and being flawed. We women worry a lot about, am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I a good mother? Am I a good wife? Because we get our value and the way we judge ourselves based on those things, right? For men, theirs are a little bit different. Men do not like to feel helpless. They do not like being controlled. The fear of failure is big for men, and being disrespected. That's their core fears. What do y'all think of that?
I think you're right on.
Well, thank you. I think I am too.
You're amazing. I'm 75. You're perfect.
I gotta take you home with me for just a little bit. You're so cute. Yeah. So these are the core fears that go on with people. And here's the thing about this. Fear is a big deal. When these core fears are triggered, we start a dance, okay? And it's the fear dance. And it looks like this. I hurt, I want, I fear, I react. I hurt, I want, I fear, I react. And when I react, which is often in a way that's different, it's not going to get me what it is that I really want. It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. Then my partner hurts. he wants, he fears, he reacts. Right? Now we're two-stepping here. This is not a dance you want to be doing. But this is what we're doing all the time. So why does fear make us react in a way that's so counter to get what we want? Life would be so perfect if I could have said to my husband, your mom makes me feel invalidated and unimportant, and when you sit there silent, it really makes me feel invalidated and unimportant, and you're the person I need to feel good about. You're the analgesic to my pain, because that's what couples do for each other. Instead of you're a big jerk, why don't you beat your mother up, what's wrong with you? Right? Well, fear does make our brains quit working to some degree. So there's one part of our brain I call Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll is logical. He is reasonable. He is able to put together patterns. All through our lives, events happen, and this part of your brain puts them together, pieces together events, and then makes assumptions. So this is the part when you were an infant, you figured out early on, if I cry, someone's going to come feed me, right? This is this part of your brain, the Dr. Jekyll part. The bad part, or the weakness of this side of the brain, is that it's the slowest part of your brain, right? The logical part takes a while to crank it out, I guess. And it makes stuff up. So all those gaps, it's piecing together information. It makes assumptions that may or may not be true. There's a second part of our brain, which is much quicker than this one. And this part's valuable because it moves us to action and reaction quickly. When there's danger, this part is the one that protects us physically and emotionally, right? It's a very important part of our brain. But it has a huge weakness too. I call this one Mr. Hyde. Not because he's evil, although it can look that way. But when Mr. Hyde is in full operation, Dr. Jekyll is shut offline. Right? The emotion side of your brain shuts down logic and reasoning. They cannot operate in sync together. It's impossible. So when Mr. Hyde kicks in, like I said, Dr. Jekyll is taken offline. And he only has 3 responses. You've heard of them: fight, flight, or freeze. Right? That's all he's got to offer us. So when you look back at the fear dance, I hurt, I want, I fear, I react. Here's what's happening. So we're in our Dr. Jekyll brain going through life. Hopefully most of the time that's who's driving our bus. And some event happens, some stimulus, some piece of information, whether someone said something to us, we had a thought, you're just having a bad day, we make something up, whatever, but we start to feel pain. I start to question my value. I start to think, I'm just not doing this thing right, or I'm not valuable, or my husband doesn't love me, or we don't kiss enough, or we don't go out enough, and we start to feel pain. That's the hurt part. What I want is for him to make me feel better. That's what we want. We don't know how to ask for what we want. He doesn't know what I want. I don't know how to ask him. How is he supposed to know what I want? So then I start, those core fears, now they're activated. Now they're kicking in. And when they kick in, that's when I start to react. And the reaction can look pretty ugly. And when I'm reacting, my husband's core fears are kicking in, and now I've got Mr. Hyde talking to Mr. Hyde. You've got 2 adults in the room and not one functional, logical, thinking brain between them. It's a recipe for disaster. So back to my epic fight. If you don't understand this dynamic, this emotional mapping of what I'm talking about, it looks like I'm nuts. And maybe I was. I'll own that. But I was newly married. I wanted desperately to be appreciated and approved of by John's family. For me, what core fear is getting activated? Do you remember them? Yeah, pretty much all of them, right? All of them. And so, getting the message from my husband that I was overreacting, that no one should confront his mom because she would get upset, what I heard was, I'm going to let you be upset. My mom's more important to me. I don't want to upset her. I'm going to let you be upset. Right? That fear is now hypervigilant. Now we're rocking. Now we're rolling here. But there's another part of this that he didn't know at the time. I didn't know was involved in all of this, but it helps make this a little bit more sense. It was a really familiar feeling to me because growing up, I was silenced. I was told to be quiet. I was sexually molested. And when I told my parents, they were extremely upset, but they didn't know how to handle it. And so they told me, shh, keep quiet, don't rock the boat. If you tell, people are going to know, and it's going to hurt you. It's going to make you look bad. I didn't go to counseling, wasn't allowed to talk about it, just be quiet about it. So when my husband was telling me, in effect, be quiet, let it go, he didn't realize it, but he was dealing with that little girl who'd been sexually molested. And that's why I tried to run over him with the car. Makes perfect sense now, right? Because I was fighting for that little girl that no one else was fighting for. Right? My husband had no idea that that's what I was fighting. That's the thing, I want to talk to you all about tonight. If your reaction or your spouse's reaction is over the top, I mean, attempted vehicular homicide counts over the top, right? If it's over the top like that, there's probably a deep wounding, a past wounding. If that's the case, you need to look into that. I couldn't get past that. I couldn't deal with my husband like a reasonable, rational adult until I had dealt with that wounded part of myself. I see so many clients who come in, people I know have had bad trauma in their childhoods, and they're angry that I even want to talk about it. It doesn't matter. Why do you want to go there? It doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters because it's triggering your emotional reactions today. And you've got to learn how to deal with that. You've got to have healing from that so that you can deal with your partner in your Dr. Jekyll brain. The funny thing was, John and I we did a lot of marriage counseling in that first year when things were crazy. And the counselors kept wanting to focus on what we were fighting about, rules for how to talk to his parents, rules for how to talk to each other, the do's and don'ts of conflict. That wasn't working so well for us. And it's probably not going to work so well for you either. And that's why I think it's really important to find a counselor that knows what they're doing in this, that truly specializes in couples. When you hear me talk about my trauma as a childhood, I want to make sure you know too that childhood trauma does not have to look like what we call the big T's, which is sexual abuse or physical abuse or severe neglect. They're the little T's of trauma too, and those are anything less than nurturing. And that's life. You know, you might have had a parent who died. You might have had a sick sibling. You might have had a mother with MS. You might have had parents who had to move a lot for a job, or a dad who had to work a lot, to support the family. This isn't bad intentional parenting on anyone's part, but the impact on you is the same, which created wounding. And since I think this is kind of the condition of the world, the human condition, I think we all have some wounding going on that we can deal with. So now I want to talk about ways couples fight. We've talked about why they fight. Why do they fight? Fear. Ways they fight. So there's clean fighting and dirty fighting. That's not so creative categories there. but it gets the point across. Clean fighting is good for your marriage. Does that surprise you? Fighting can be healthy. Why would you think that's possible? Why would fighting be healthy? Clears the air. She said it clears the air, doesn't it? It really does. Anybody else? Mm-hmm. Yeah. When somebody comes in my office and they're fighting, and I find out it's clean fighting, it's a sign of good health for me because it tells me that I've got two partners who are equals. And they feel like they can say and stand up for themselves and express their opinion, and no one's getting punished for it. Right? Clean fighting means you're mostly in your Dr. Jekyll brain. That doesn't mean the conversation doesn't get heated. My husband and I still yell at each other. We're just not raging at each other. We're not yelling obscenities at each other. We're not trying to run over each other with a car. And nobody's running and pulling away, right? So we're able to problem solve. We're able to compromise because we're not getting activated. None of these fears are getting activated. One of the things I used to do to dirty fight was when things got hard, I threatened divorce all the time. Well, I don't like that, I'm just leaving. I'm going to divorce you. Now we know that that's a place we're not allowed to go. Telling your partner you want a divorce is emotional abuse. Pretty severe. But a lot of us do it. We have our personal space. We give it to each other. Not as a license to avoid a conversation, but it's a respectable distance taking. Clean fighting is talking to your spouse, even in a disagreement, that doesn't make your spouse look or feel bad. So if I have a client that comes in my office and they want to tell me about the big fight they had, I've recently just started saying, okay, wait, I want to hear what you have to say, but you have to tell me about that fight in a way that does not make your partner look or feel bad. They really struggle with that. I have to help them do that a lot. They're so used to going to, he's an asshole, you know? So we have to kind of practice that. That's hard to do. Here's what dirty fighting looks like. Dirty fighting is soul damaging. It whittles away at your partner's dignity and can rob and destroy your marriage. Dirty fighting means one of you is walking on eggshells. Maybe both of you. There's usually one person who's willing to raise the ante higher than the other one's willing to go. And that's how they win. They shut it down. I had a client one time, he said, look, I bring a penknife to a fight and she comes in with a tank and obliterates me. Right? That's dirty fighting. If both partners are willing to go to extreme places, then we can see a lot of domestic violence. If one partner is intimidated by the other partner, we have an imbalance of power, and that's really toxic for your relationship. Now remember, I've said this, I said you're going to hear this a few times tonight. A relationship can survive fights. It cannot survive a loss of safety and security. You cannot fight dirty and have your spouse feel secure and safe in the relationship. It is impossible. And if you're fighting dirty like that in front of your kids don't feel safe and secure either. And you may say it's not directed at them. They don't have the boundaries that tell them that. They absorb it as if it is directed at them. And God forbid you're one of the parents who actually talk to their kids that way, but it happens. Dirty fighting is name-calling, raging, slamming doors, pouting. The fight I described to you earlier between my husband and I is dirty fighting. Making your spouse feel there's something wrong with them, shaming them. It's not that they're aggravating you, but there's something defective about them, is dirty fighting. It's hounding your spouse because you're wanting something from them that they can't or don't want to give you in the moment, whether it's reassurance, whether it's an answer to a question, whether it's to make you feel loved and secured, and you just don't stop. You're coming after them and after them and after them. It's haranguing, is dirty fighting. Days and months and years of silence is dirty fighting. Withholding sex is dirty fighting, unless you're withholding sex to put the marriage on hold, which is an appropriate way to set limits. And we can talk about that more later if you have questions about that. It's threatening divorce when you're angry. It's being so passive, aggressive, and ugly that you don't even have to be responsible or accountable for it. Do you know what I mean? What it's like to be passive, aggressive in an ugly way? So I can be really snarky or catty, and my husband's like, "What's the matter? Is something wrong?" "No, I'm fine. Just fine." Asshole. Right? I'm punishing him. But I don't have to be accountable for that because he's coming to me and saying what's going on, and I'm dropping the ball. This must be your imagination. I'm fine. What's wrong with you? Right? I don't have to be accountable for that. Dirty fighting is retreating and not being present when your spouse needs you to show up. And the one that I see a lot, and I started seeing it in my kids when they were little, drove me crazy, that they make fun of each other, and then when the other one gets their feelings hurt, they say, "I was just joking." Right? Spouses do that to each other too. You're too sensitive. I'm particularly tender about that one, I think. So where do we learn to fight? Unfortunately, we learn to fight from mom and dad. And the reason I say unfortunate, I don't know, are you guys hot? Like, I feel like it's 110 in here. Yeah. Michael, I don't know if you hear me if you're up there, but if we could have some air on, that would be like fabulous. So we learn to fight from our parents, and there's good news and bad news. For me, before I was able to turn some things around, it was really potentially bad for my kids and even worse for their potential mates. Because you have two unskilled relational people who are trying to figure this thing out called marriage, and they don't know what they're doing either, right? It always amazed me that we have to have a license to drive a car, study and take a test, but anybody can get a license to get married. There should be some kind of preparation. So clean fighting clean, is a combination of skills. And I did want to say this too, before I forget. I kind of touched on it, but if your kids are watching dirty fighting at home, let me tell you what they're going to do. They're going to do one of two things. They're either going to repeat the pattern and they're going to be the dirty fighter in their marriage, or they are going to find a dirty fighter in their marriage and enable, because it's familiar to them. So you're setting them up in all the future generations by what they're watching in your home. This is a really big deal, and guys, this can damage kids. It's very damaging to see this kind of stuff going on. If you can't get this fighting under control, this is the only time that you'll hear someone where I work say, separate. Because if there's physical abuse or if there's damaging fighting that's not being controlled in the home, you need to separate until you can pull it together. People, when I tell them that, they'll usually fight back with me and say, "Well, the kids are too young to know what's happening, or they're in bed when it happens." Don't kid yourself. You can't have that much toxic emotion going on in a house and it not be eking out all over them. That's what we deal with every day. All right, so skills. So if fighting is about skills, and you all have heard them, every time I get on Facebook, I see how to fight. And so one of the things I see is don't bring up the past. So tell me some things you see about not fighting. How to fight fair. Tell me what kind of things you read. Yeah. Listen. Yeah. What else? Yeah. Oh, I love the I statements. Use I statements, not you statements. I think you're a jerk. Right. You see it a lot, though, don't you? What else do you see? How to fight fair.
Stick to the topic. Don't bring up past fights.
Yeah. Somebody probably wrote down somewhere, don't try to hit your husband with a car. Don't call names. Right? Don't go to bed angry. You heard that one? Don't go to bed angry. John and I would have been up for days. Yeah. Well, I've got some good news and some bad news. Skills are necessary, but they're not sufficient. They're not enough. They are not going to keep you and your marriage calm and off the crazy track. Why is that? Because once your Mr. Hyde brain is in gear and triggered, you're not thinking. You have to be thinking to remember those skills and to use them. So when you're in the moment, you're in the plane with your partner and the plane is about to crash, and you jump out with your parachute, trying to remember those skills is like reading the instructions on how to open your parachute on the way down. It's not going to happen. And that's where we get in trouble. We finally started figuring this out because all us marriage experts and marriage counselors realized we're going home and blowing it. We know the skills. Why is this not working? So instead of a list of do's and don'ts that won't work for you anyway, I'm going to teach you what the stances are, where you tend to go when you fight, and then I'm going to give you one parachute move. Whatever stance you're in, that one move is that thing you can do to de-escalate. Now remember, this isn't about solving your problems. You need therapy for that. You need to come hire us for that. But tonight I'm trying to teach you how to keep it calmer so that your Dr. Jekyll brain is working, because that's the place where you can reason, logic, negotiate. So there's basically two fighting stances. There is pursue and withdraw, and then the combination. And so pursue and withdraw looks awfully similar to Hyde's 3 responses: fight, flight, freeze. And so pursue can look like fighting, withdraw looks like flight or freeze, and the combination is a combination. Now, if you're fortunate like I am, I'm bilingual. I can do all of these, right? So you may have to remember 1 or 2 parachute moves. So, fighting stances. Both pursuers and both withdrawers have 2 kinds. There's anxious pursuer and angry pursuer, and an anxious withdrawer and an angry withdrawer. And I don't want you to be confused by this, because any of these categories, all of them are anxious. And all of them can be angry. That's not what categorizes them. Do y'all feel that air? That feels so good. Thank you, whoever did that. It's what you let your partner see that categorizes it. Everybody's anxious that's involved in this. Remember, your Hyde brain's in gear. But it's what you let your partner see. So let's kind of talk a little bit more about this. The biggest difference between the pursuers and the withdrawers is that both of them are handling their fear and anxiety in different ways. So the pursuer is looking to reach out for affirmation, and the withdrawer is pulling back, doesn't want to risk it. Does that make sense? So the anxious pursuer, my husband was the anxious pursuer in our story. He was afraid of me walking out. I was always threatening to leave and threatening to divorce. He couldn't stand the thought of me leaving him. The downside to this stance is that your partner can feel easily suffocated. Sometimes people need their space, And if you're an anxious pursuer, this will make you nervous at times, especially if there's anger involved. Or tension. It makes you want to cling even more. You'll keep finding your partner wherever they are. You'll chase them down and ask for reassurance often. And your partner often feels like you're needy. It's a turnoff. And they feel they can't do enough or be enough for you to feel loved and secure. You want to meet your partner's needs, and you want him or her to meet your needs. And in a perfect world, you would have long talks about the relationship often. And if you're married to a withdrawer, this is hell. They think it's exhausting, heavy, and high maintenance. The other type of pursuer is the angry pursuer. Now, this one also fears distance, but they come out fighting. This looks like complaints and criticism. If you're an angry pursuer, your partner is confused because you say you want them around more, you're finding all kinds of fault with them, they start to avoid you, and then you're angry because they're not there more. Again, acting opposite to what it is you're really wanting. You're just trying to get their attention when you pick on your partner, and to an angry pursuer, negative attention is better than no attention. But it looks like to your partner that you don't love them, you don't even like them. Even if things are going well for a while, you'll take that as an opportunity to complain more because you feel like now's a good time to have that conversation. And like the anxious pursuer, you can spend hours talking about the relationship. Most likely your partner's afraid of you if you're an angry pursuer, and they're trying to keep away from you to avoid criticism or anger. The anxious withdrawer. If you're an anxious withdrawer, you probably learned conflict was bad as a kid, either because there was too much of it and it was too scary, or maybe you just came from a house where it was so low-keeled that any emotion, whether it's good or bad, positive joy or negative anger, we think of anger as negative, then it all feels too much, too scary for you. You'll do anything to avoid a blow-up or even just an unhappy spouse. You'll often kill yourself to accommodate what your spouse needs or wants, and you don't ask for your own needs to be met. These are the people that stay in relationships for years, and they're really unhappy, and they're not talking about how unhappy they are. And so one day they just get hopeless and they leave. They just say, I'm done. And the partner's like, what? It's like, I've been unhappy for a long time and you should have known. Didn't you know? But they didn't know. And women are oftentimes anxious withdrawers. And women file for divorce in this country 75% of the time. Oftentimes you'll overcommit to things and then resent it, that you're doing it. You have bad boundaries if you're an anxious withdrawer. And over time, your partner can become too dependent on you. You're probably spoiling them, doing too much for them, making things too easy for them because you don't want to rock the boat. The angry withdrawer is the king or queen of passive-aggressive. You use passive aggression to punish your partner without ever admitting you are angry or hurt, so you miss deadlines. You lie to your partner. The thing about and holding grudges is big for you too. You feel like your partner should just know what it is you want or need. You shouldn't have to ask. I can't tell you how many times I hear a woman in particular come into my office and say, why should I have to tell him I need a hug? He should know. Anybody would know that. Because he can't read your mind. That's exactly right. I mean, if we could figure that out. Yeah. Just an interesting note. Oh, another thing that angry withdrawers can do, oftentimes when it gets too intense and you're coming at them either anxiously or angrily and you're needing connection and they're needing space, they will scorch the earth to shut you down. They're the ones that bring in the tank when you've got the penknife because they want this over. And they put that wall there as an anger to protect themselves and to keep you separate from them. An interesting note, withdrawers are more likely to have physical or emotional affairs. Why do you think that is? Not saying they will. If your husband or wife's a withdrawer, don't go home and snoop. I said they're more likely to have an affair. Why is that? Lack of connection. And they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to say, I'm unhappy. They're not going to say, we don't ever have sex and it really bothers me. They're just going to sit quietly and stew in it for a while and be open to someone else who's willing to be that person for them. Does it make sense? Here's the really cool thing about relationships and connection. I'm almost out of time, so I'll hurry. When kids are little, we're taught as parents that it's really important to give them a lot of love and attention, right? Well, there was a time period where we really screwed up a whole generation of kids because somebody was out there, some big expert, and he was saying, if you love and hug on your kids too much, you're going to spoil them and make them weak. Do any of you older people remember that? And what we found is that's not true. We were making a generation of kids who were extremely fearful and extremely dependent and not able to stand on their own. Well, here's the thing. We don't grow out of that. When we become adults, that attachment to that one person is still so important. And in therapy, we're mucking around with that, and we're calling it things like codependent, too dependent. You shouldn't need someone that much. Now, yes, you can overdo anything, but that attachment is so strong. And when they did studies of the MRI of the brain, here's what they found. They found when you feel distant from your partner, when these core fears, or wherever they are, you remember them, when they're activated, it lights up the same pain centers in the brain as physical pain, the same ones. And when you're in physical pain and you have a toothache, you are longing for relief, right? Well, when you're in emotional pain, you're longing for relief too, but there's only one place you can get it, the want, your spouse, that significant other, that partner. And the really cool thing about that study was they had the other person come in, and I don't know who would sign up for this, but they're in this MRI thing, and they're inflicting physical pain to watch the brain light up. And if they had their partner there holding their hand and speaking to them, the pain centers dimmed. They were able to withstand more pain. But the really cool thing about it was that partner could leave the room and they could just remember that person being there. And the pain centers would dim. So this connection with your partner, this is a big deal. And if you have a strong, safe relationship with your partner, you're going to live longer, you're going to be healthier. It has biological, physical, emotional, all kinds of health benefits. This is a big deal. And that's why we need to get better as therapists in dealing with it. And we need to get better as people in insisting that we have that closeness in our relationship and stop settling for what's not working. So I need my 8 volunteers. Let's do this pretty quickly and then we can all go home. Okay, they're going to read a stance. They're going to give you an example because these can get confusing. It can look like a lot of different things. So I'm trying to help you bring it in and apply it to yourself, okay? And your job is to guess, are they an angry pursuer, an angry withdrawer? Are they an anxious pursuer, an anxious withdrawer, okay? All right, so you first.
I fear my husband doesn't love me anymore. He works all the time. He never checks in with me during the day. He was furious with me yesterday because I blew up his phone with text messages and calls. I wouldn't have done that if he had just answered me. Why doesn't he want to talk to me? Why is he never home at night when he says he will be?
Anxious pursuer? Ooh, they're good.
My husband works a lot of hours and I never get to be his priority. Last night we got in a big fight because I wanted to talk about how much he works and how I have been feeling. He yelled at me, went into our bedroom and locked the door. It made me so angry. I just stood outside the door and yelled at him to talk to me. I banged on the door for 30 minutes and he never let me in. Finally, I slept on the couch and cried myself to sleep.
Angry pursuer? What's your say?
anxious pursuer.
Anxious pursuer. Anxious because, remember, they can all be angry, right? But she wasn't criticizing, attacking. She was going for reassurance. Come on, help me. I need you. Clinging. Got it? Good, I'm glad we're doing this.
My wife spends too much money each month. We have agreed on a budget, but she will not stick with it. I feel so angry at her sometimes, but I don't ever say anything. What's the point? It just isn't worth the hassle. I'll just keep working and bringing in the money and hope she doesn't spend it all.
I can't hear y'all. What? Anxious withdrawer. Are they right?
Anxious withdrawer.
Very good.
Today, my husband came home late without calling to let us know when to expect him. This is the 4th night this week. I keep asking him to call, and he never does. So tonight, when he didn't call, I threw out his dinner. When he got home, we had all eaten, and I made sure we were all in bed. He came home to a dark, quiet house and no dinner. That will show him. Tomorrow, I'll wake up like nothing happened at all, or I may stay quiet and distant for a few days.
What is it? What did they say? Can you hear them?
I'm hearing anxious.
I heard anxious too. Angry withdrawer. Right. This one's got a grudge.
My husband ignores me. I'm trying to have a conversation and he simply ignores me. His head is always stuck in that phone. The more he ignores, the more I poke at him. I can't stand his smug look of indifference. Last night, I threw a plate at the wall. I was so mad. How dare he treat me this way?
Angry pursuer. Right. She's coming out fighting, right? Negative attention is better than no attention. Good.
My wife doesn't show me enough affection. She's a cold fish. Forget about sex, we never have it. She's had time for everyone else but me.
You better not make any more comments about that.
Tonight I told her that I think she's selfish and cold. She got angry, but I'm the one telling the truth. She needs to think about whether she wants this marriage. I think there's something wrong with her.
What is that? Angry pursuer. Very good.
My wife is always fussing at me. She drives me nuts. I just want to be left alone. When do I ever get my time? She complains about everything. Nothing I do is right. Every time she starts to go at it, I tell her we are not having this conversation, and I leave the room.
What is it? What are y'all saying? Angry withdrawer. Angry withdrawer.
My husband is often mad and pops his cork at home. I never know what will set him off. I try to keep the kids quiet so he won't be bothered. I make sure the house is clean. When it's time for him to come home, I scramble to make sure everything is the way he likes it. I couldn't possibly tell him how stressed I feel. He would just tell me I'm overly sensitive or worse, get angry and lose it with me. It isn't worth the potential cost.
They get it?
Yeah, anxious withdrawal.
All right, very good. Okay, so you guys are getting it, right? And so these are the different types of responses and where we get into with our couples. If you're the anxious pursuer, your parachute move is time. Distance is what is causing your anxiety to ratchet up. I want you to give yourself time to calm down, give your spouse time for some space. And when you set up a time to talk, that's way better than coming and wanting to dump it all at one time. So it looks like, let's schedule a time to talk. And I want a time limit, 15 to 30 minutes, no more. No more 5-hour phone or long conversations about where the relationship is till 2 a.m. in the morning. And it happens, I hear it every day, right? So your job is time. And let your spouse know. And when you set a time limit, it's so important to keep it. Because if you go past it, you break that promise, he or she is not going to be willing to sit with you the next time. Okay? If you're the angry pursuer, your parachute move is wish. You're coming out fighting, and I get it, you're angry. And you probably have good reason to be angry. The thing about angry pursuers is they're often right. We know that as therapists. They're often with people who are too disengaged, not picking up the slack. They're under-functioning in relationships, but you're coming out angry. And when you throw criticism and complaint at your husband or your wife, you're not giving them anywhere to go with that. There's no way to answer that. All you're doing is putting their Mr. Hyde in the driver's seat. That's all you're doing. Behind every complaint or criticism is a wish. I want you to drop the complaint and focus on the wish. I'm going to show you in a minute what that looks like. If you're the angry withdrawer, your job is to ask. It is to ask for what your wants and needs are. It's to set limits when you need to set limits by asking for what you need. This is really hard to do if you're a withdrawer, but it's so important to act opposite of what it is that you're wanting to do. And if you're the anxious withdrawer, you've got to speak up. Usually I'm telling clients to stay quieter, to de-escalate. Your job is to escalate. It's to get some action going there. Speak up. All right. So now you're going to read what it would sound like for you if you would use the parachute move instead. Dan?
It's Ben.
Ben. I have two Bens. All right. Go ahead.
I fear my husband doesn't love me anymore. He works all the time. He never checks in with me during the day. Yesterday I was tempted to keep texting and calling, but instead I sent out one text. It read, "I hope you're having a good day. How about a date tonight at your favorite restaurant? Let me know and I'll make reservations. Signed, Furious Anxious Pursuer."
Good. Good. Just pass it on down. Yeah.
My husband works a lot of hours and I never feel I'm his priority. Last night we got into a big fight because I wanted to talk about how much he works and how I've been feeling. He yelled at me, went into our bedroom and locked the door. I waited for an hour before I calmly knocked on the door. I told him I felt it was important we discuss what happened, and when he was ready, I would be here. I promised to keep the conversation to 15 minutes or less. Signed, Former Anxious Pursuer.
Go ahead.
My wife spends too much money each month. We have agreed on a budget, but she will not stick with it. I feel so angry at her sometimes, and tonight I'm going to tell her how I feel. I'm going to show her the numbers and how her spending is hurting us financially. Then I'm going to ask that she partner with me. If she gets angry or refuses to work with me, I will find out how to respectfully set limits. Signed, Former Anxious Withdrawal.
Good.
Today, my husband came home late without calling to let us know when to expect him. This is the fourth night this week. I keep asking him to call, and he never does. So tonight, when he didn't call, I went ahead and fed myself and the kids. I put a plate in the oven for him. While he was eating, I told him how it makes me feel when he doesn't call. I told him I was building up a lot of resentment over this, and I was afraid it was going to hurt our relationship. I told him I wasn't sure what would happen in the future if this happened again, but he needed to know I was hurt and angry. Then I kissed him on the forehead and went to bed. Signed, Former Angry Withdrawer.
My husband ignores me. Tonight, if I am feeling ignored, I'm going to politely ask him to put down his phone and see if we can talk about our day, just for a few minutes. Maybe I'll see if he will take a walk with me. If he doesn't want to do that tonight, I'll ask him when he does want to go. Signed, Former Angry Pursuer.
My wife doesn't show me enough affection. Forget about sex. We never have it. It often seems she has time for everyone else but me. Tonight I will ask her if we can take the kids to her parents' house and get away for the weekend. I intend to tell her how important it is to me that we have sex more frequently because it lets me feel close to her, and this makes me feel better about everything. If she turns me down, and she probably will, because life is crazy busy for us, I will ask for a time when we can go in the future. Signed, former angry pursuer.
My wife is always fussing at me. She drives me nuts. I just want to be left alone. The next time she starts to fuss at me, I'm going to tell her that criticizing me makes me feel like running away. I'm going to tell her I love her, but I need her to speak more respectfully to me. If she can't keep under control, I'm going to tell her I'm going to take a long shower, and when I'm out, we can try this again. Signed, former angry withdrawer.
My husband is often mad and pops his cork at home. I never know what will set him off. I try to keep the kids quiet so we won't be bothered. I make sure the house is clean. When it's time for him to come home, I scramble to make sure everything is the way he likes it. This is no way to live. Tonight, I'm going to tell him what it's like for me and how I have been feeling. I'm going to tell him that I love him, but he has to get his anger under control. If he isn't willing to do this, I will learn how to set limits. But I don't want to live in a house where I'm walking on eggshells anymore. Signed, former anxious withdrawer.
You guys did a fabulous job. Let's give you guys a hand. Thank you. You can have a seat. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. And just remember, the wishes, the parachute moves is not a fix. I understand that. But it's to keep your relationship on an even keel, to stop escalating so that you can work through these things. Okay, so tonight we've talked about why couples fight, ways they fight. Hopefully you know your stance, the move you make in relationships when you're in trouble. Your one parachute move to de-escalate the emotional chaos and bring down reaction. And the last part is, how do you make things better? How do you really make things better? And we're going to go through this quickly because I don't want to run over. One is you've got to stop the dirty fighting. Absolutely stop it. Stop giving yourself the permission to indulge, and it is an emotional indulgence. It feels good sometimes to rage at your partner, and you've got to set a limit on yourself. If you're not able to set it on yourself, your spouse needs to do it for you, and that's not going to be pleasant for anyone. Limit setting. Now, I do want to say this. If you're in a physically abusive situation, we do not recommend this because that's not safe. It's going to ramp up your partner. You need to talk to us before you do something like that. But otherwise, if you're in a situation that's just crazy couples fighting at war all the time, you need to learn how to set limits to stop this. Stop minimizing what's going on. Stop minimizing it to yourself. Stop minimizing it to your partner. This is not okay. The most important thing that you can do in all of this is to make repair. I'm convinced the reason my husband and I have made it 27 years after the rockiest first 2 or 3 years that I've ever heard of in a marriage is because we knew how to make repair. Because making repair is what makes you feel safe and secure. Let me tell you what making repair is not. Making repair is not waiting until it all blows over and everybody is okay again. That's not making repair. It is not ignoring what happened until we're talking again. It's not blowing your cool and then being really, really sweet. Telling your wife that she's an idiot and then coming in with her favorite treat or a present is not making repair. Making repair is pointing at the elephant that's in the middle of the room and saying, wow, this is bad. I'm so sorry that I blew it. I lost my cool and I hurt you and I'm sorry. And I will learn to do it better the next time. And then holding yourself accountable so that you do. That is making repair. It looks like healing and resolution. If relationships survive fighting, because we all go through it, guys. We all fight. Do whatever you have to do to make your partner feel safe and secure with you. Your home should be the safest place in the world for your spouse and kids. And if it's not, you have a job to do. That's your work in this. And if you can make them feel safe and loved, they will forgive a multitude of imperfections and mistakes. I lived it. He's still with me. Thank you guys for having me tonight.